All right. Well, welcome to Inside the Realtor Studio, interviews with industry leaders and professionals in real estate. We'll learn how people came to be in real estate, lessons learned from the experience, and how the real estate community played a part. Today's guest is the fabulous Joeann Fossland. Joeann Fossland has been in the Tucson real estate community for many moons and just recently announced that in 2021 she is pulling away from day to day operations. Joeann has served us as a fellow realtor, real estate instructor, coach, mentor, author and publisher, and speaker extraordinaire. Some of Joeann's many real estate milestones include being elected or awarded 1986 Tucson Affiliate of the Year. In 1995, was elected as the Tucson Women's Council of Realtors President. In 1996, was elected the Women's Council of Realtors State President. In 1999, was awarded the Best Interpersonal Trainer Award from Agent News. 2006 was named one of real estate's top 10 women bloggers by Celsius. In 2008 was awarded the Arizona State Women Council of Realtors Distinguished Service Award. In 2008 was named one of the top 25 most influential women in real estate by Stefan Swanepoel as part of the 2008 Swanepoel Trends Report. And for those who don't know, he's usually listing 200 people. So the fact that she was in the top 25 says a lot. 2014 was awarded Realtor Emeritus Lifetime Membership from the Tucson Association of Realtors. Joeann's coaching practice was always filled with inspiring people who wanted more than just the ordinary and who wanted to play a big game. In her seminars and workshops, she opened the door to working less and making more by showing her audience how to tap into the brilliance and resources they already possess. Let's give a huge Inside the Realtor Studio hug to Joeann Fossland. Hi, Joeann.
Steve, thank you.
You betcha. Good morning. And I could have gone on much longer. There's many more accolades to be seen there, some of which, if you go to her website, joeann.com, you'll be able to read about. So, as they say, it's not about where you've landed, it's about the journey. And it's all about how a Baltimore girl landed in Tucson, Arizona. It sounded like you were quite a student in Baltimore. From where did you graduate high school?
I went to St. Paul's School for Girls, and we just had our 50th reunion about 2 or 3 years ago. And we only had 29 people in our class. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah. And so they were probably pretty pleased that their valedictorian returned for the 50th reunion, aren't they?
Well, I took on being class secretary. Excuse me.
Sure.
And nobody else wants to do it. So it's one of those things, you volunteer to try to help. And so it's been wonderful because I've been able to stay in touch. There's 21 of us still alive. There were 7
Hey, that's pretty good.
At the reunion. So
yeah.
That's pretty much my visiting Baltimore, but it was good.
So what made you leave Baltimore?
Well, at 18, I married my high school sweetheart, had 2 children. He went to Vietnam. And so I lived at the air base down in Columbus, Georgia. And from there, we moved to Florida. When he got out of the Army, he went to Florida Institute of Technology, and then we bought a sandal shop on the beach. So at 20 years old, I had 2 kids. I'd left Baltimore. I had my own business with my husband, which I would tell people don't ever, ever do. But but that was the beginning of me seeing the world, really. He came back from the war like many people, really damaged.
Uh,
And so our marriage didn't last. The kids and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I opened a second store. So
oh,
uh,
wow.
I had a bookstore, head shop, and leather store where
What
I
year
made
was that?
crafts.
That in
That
the
was
70s?
it was 1970.
Okay.
Yes. And I was there for a little while, Steve, and realized I'd never been west of the Mississippi. And
Okay.
I heard all these wonderful things about the West. And I thought I have these two little kids that were 3 and 5 by then, I think. And I thought, pretty soon they're going to go to school and I'm going to have to settle down and be a normal person. And like you said, it was the 70s and there was all sorts of things going on. So I bought a 31-foot school bus, and we took off across the country. My next door neighbor had been a professor at Emory University, and he had just gotten divorced and had 3 small kids. So he came along for the trip, and we picked up hitchhikers and went wherever they wanted to go. And we ended up going all the way across the country, all the way up the West Coast, and then back down. And the bus broke down in Aspen, and I lived
Good
there
place
for
to break down.
and back then, people that ski will love this. It was $250 for a ski pass for the whole season.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I hated the cold weather. I never went skiing. My children grew up skiing, and love it. But we were there for 4 years. I met my second husband there, who was a rodeo cowboy, and some of the time, and we had quite an adventure. But that also didn't last. And I visited a friend in Tucson. So this is a long story of how I got to Tucson. And it was February and it was 80 degrees.
Yeah.
And I had been in our cabin. So I forgot the funnest part about Aspen was living in a teepee at
Oh, okay.
8,500 feet through the winter. So there was
Wow.
one morning it was 16 below and we
Oh,
had no electricity or running water or anything like that. So these days I say I've camped out. Been there, done that. And right now camping is no room service after midnight.
well, I don't blame you. Now, I'm going to ask, I'm just curious, considering this travel pattern and lifestyle. I mean, you're very on point with all of your businesses, you know, bowing to the current trends of the time, so to speak. Did you have bohemian parents?
No, no. My daddy worked for Reynolds Metals and he was a salesman. So I did get sales
Okay.
training from my
Okay.
daddy. My mother had been Miss Arkansas in 1936
Wow.
and was very much a Southern gal. So I got even a Southern accent living in Baltimore. When I was waitressing at 18, I'd go to the table and say, "Do y'all want any dessert?" And they go, "Where are you from?"
So now, while you were in Aspen, I think there's what were you doing for a living while you were there?
Well, I started out, I did a couple things. I bartended, so that was part of my experience. But the other part was working at Aspen Leather Company. So I had the leather shop down in Florida and again in Georgia. And out of the school bus, I also had sold leather stuff and had a really nice machine that would sew everything. I ended up making a quilt for Jill St. John and doing some stuff
Wow.
for John Denver because they were all people that lived
Sure.
up there, and we were the classiest leather store in town.
That was
So,
operating out of a bus?
yeah, well, they actually had a store right on the main street in Aspen.
Oh,
So
okay.
It
right.
wasn't, I didn't own Aspen Leather
Oh,
Company. I
okay.
worked for somebody there as a seamstress. But after 2 years, I quit and started my own company called Back Porch Feather and Leather. And I had friends that went hunting and they'd get the birds and bring the feathers to me. So I was making earrings, I was making hat bands,
Oh,
and
fun.
ended up again working out really well because I had so many people that wanted them. I hired 4 other girls in Aspen to work for me.
Nice.
After I moved to Tucson, I continued doing that. And at one point had 20 girls working piecemeal, which was wonderful because it was mostly mothers that had kids at home and they could make
Sure.
hat bands. And this was before the hat bands from China came in, and I had 4 Stetson hat reps that bought hat bands from me. So we sold hundreds of dozens of hat bands.
Did you keep the operation in Colorado, or did you move it to
Well,
Arizona?
I moved it to Arizona because everything was just mailing it out. They didn't care where I was. So I actually had a storefront down at Stone and Grant,
Okay.
and or close to there. It was a little bit up Stone, where I would go in every day and ship the stuff out. The girls would bring it in, and my husband teases me because what happened was I was ready to stay home. Some man walked, real estate agent, into my office and said, "Do you want to sell your business?" Commercial agent. And I went, "I don't know. What's my business worth?" And he came back and he says, "Well, we've got a lot of blue sky here," which was like, what does that have to do? I learned some real estate terms. I ended up selling, I think it was 16 boxes of feathers for $65,000
Wow.
because it was my girls and all of
Sure.
the Stetson hat contacts and all of that. So I intended to stay home with my kids who were then teenagers, only to find out they didn't want me to stay home and they mostly weren't there anyway. So after a year of being retired, I became a welcome wagon hostess. And the welcome wagon
Sure. Oh, yeah.
hostesses take their baskets and go out to people that are getting married or just had a baby or just moved. And really what the job is to businesses, and then you get paid for each little thing
Sure.
you give away. So a friend of mine told me about a friend of his that owned a ERA real estate business, and I've been racking my brain and can't remember his name.
Oh,
But I went in to see him and did a really good presentation, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't know what they pay you doing this, but you can make, let me show you what you could make if you came to work for me."
okay.
And
Now, is
so,
this still all with husband number 2 at this point?
no, I divorced husband number 2 when I moved to Tucson
Oh, okay. All right.
and was a single mom for about 3 years, and then met the love of my life, who I'm now married 38 years
Wow.
to. And he figured into this actually because this was after I'd been here. It was 1982.
Uh-huh.
The average sales price was $46,000. And he shows me a commission on $46,000. I don't remember, it was like 1,200 or something.
Sure.
Back then, it was usually a 7% commission on both sides.
Mhm.
And I went, "Wow, really?" And he says, "All you have to do is you go to real estate school, you come back and see me, and I'll put you to work." So I go home, and husband number 3 is there, and his name is Bob. I said, "Guess what? I went in this real estate office today. He's going to hire me, and I'm going to make all this money." And he looked at me and he said, "Joann," and I'm going to be politically correct here. It wasn't quite the word he used, but he said, "Realtors are lower than whale increment." Excrement.
Excrement. Yeah. I knew where you're going. Uh,
And I went, "They are?" And he goes, "Yeah." But he paid for me to go to Hogan's.
aw, okay. He
And
believed in you.
and has never been sorry. But you know, Steve, that was a real interesting take, because as I was teaching classes for years, we talk about reputation. And you know, they do that yearly thing of ranking the different professions and how well thought of they were. And back then we were below used car salesmen.
Right.
And it has, NAR has done a good job over the past years in giving us a reputation that isn't like that. And certainly, you know, most realtors aren't, but I think we were known not by the great care we gave back then. So
it's 1982 and that, and did you go to work for that ERA gentleman? You didn't. Oh, who'd you go to work for?
That's why I didn't remember his name. But he was really mad at me. But I interviewed people and I found out anybody would hire you. Really, it wasn't that I was so wonderful in my sales presentation. But I interviewed Debbie Goodman at the time, was at Red Carpet.
Right.
And I loved her. I came really, really close to going to work for her.
Oh, but you didn't.
I didn't.
Okay.
The biggest company in town was Tucson Realty and Trust.
Sure.
And I used to say Tucson Realty. And answered the phone like that one day when one of the other office managers called in and told me very clearly it was Real Tea. And I got it down. But they were interesting, Steve. They had 11 offices. And because they were also an insurance company, we were employees. So back then we got medical, we got paid vacation, we got everything that a normal employee would get.
Nice.
Which was kind of unusual, being that we're all independent contractors now.
So you wound up going with them. Which office were you at? I
was in the McGee Oracle office.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was the furthest. I mean, there was almost nothing further north. Oro Valley didn't exist. As I said, the average sales price was $46,000. And on my 6th month working for them, I was salesperson of the month. And I was so proud. I had sold a $240,000 house to the family of Joe Kivel, who developed Elcon Mall. And I had no idea they were famous people. And obviously his father knew lots of realtors, but I was doing an open house on an afternoon during the week. And these people came into my open house and we hit it off and they bought this house from us, or from me. And so it was like, you know, $246,000 back then was a really expensive house.
So now 1982, what was the technology of the day?
We had a whole wall of books. And every day, TAR sent out a runner to all the offices with all of the new listings. And we had a secretary whose job it was to put the new listings in the books by price range and by area and take the sold ones out and put the expired ones over there. And telephones. That was the other technology. So yes, technology, it was actually by then 1983.
Was there carbon paper involved?
Oh yes. But the contract was only 3 pages.
Okay.
So it didn't, and I don't know that we even had addendums. I'm sure we probably did, but it was very interesting. And microfiche. So we'd look up, that's how the MLS was, is we'd look up things on microfiche.
Well, you know, being the entrepreneur that you've been in that, how long, I mean, you started in 1982, did you say?
It was actually 83 by the time I got my license.
But very shortly thereafter, you had started branching out and doing other things in real estate. What came first?
Well, people would ask me if I liked real estate because I just told everybody. I mean, I'm not a shy person, you know that. And so I was so excited, and people said, "Well, what do you like about it?" I said, "Well, I get to go look in people's closets and talk on the phone all day. It's so much fun." I had a great manager. Bill Check was my manager there at Tucson Realty. And about, I don't know, probably 6 months into being there, I saw a notice come through from the board about a meeting for women. And it was called Women's Council of Realtors.
Okay.
And so I went ahead and signed up for it and went to this meeting. I was the only person there from Tucson Realty, and
Wow.
there were 60 people there. So I liked it, but after the meeting, I went back to Bill's office and I said, "Did I do something wrong? There's nobody else there from Tucson Realty." He said, "No, you did something right. You go get involved."
Good.
And so the next month, I said, "I'd like to be on a committee. I'd like to get involved." I had already gone to TAR and gotten on the RAPAC committee,
Okay.
which I ended up actually chairing the next year. And I just was so impressed with kind of life outside of just talking on the phone and looking in closets.
Sure.
Back then, Women's Council was, and they are now, very much a leadership development
Hmm.
group. And they had programs that were, it was like a program in a box. You could read it. It was the 20-minute whatever. And because I was on the legislative committee, they asked me to do the program for the next month. This was actually 84. It was my next year. And I said, sure. Now, I had never, ever spoken in public before.
Oh.
I was so scared. My voice shook. And it was funny because Jim Chumbler, who was also a member, and you probably are interviewing Jim.
Yep, we've already done that. Yep.
Yep, past president of both Women's Council and TAR.
Okay.
He comes up to me after the meeting because we met there was a meeting room behind the hotel there at Speedway by the university. And we filled up the room. We had like 100 people at that meeting. And like I said, I've never spoken before. I was real prepared, but really scared. And he says after the meeting, there was something wrong with the mics because they were reverberating. And I didn't tell him. No, it was me. So that started my speaking career.
Okay.
Within a year, I worked hard. I worked 7 days a week. I was on call 24 hours a day. All the things I am now, or through the years coaching, getting people to stop doing.
Yeah.
But it's so hard in the beginning because people don't know how to put those boundaries in place. And it will just kind of be at the beck and call because it's all about taking care of clients.
Hmm.
I left the Thanksgiving dinner because I had a crazy client that called me and was yelling at me and said I had to come out there right then. And
Oh,
I did
no.
it.
Oh,
Yep.
no.
2 weeks later, Ted Turpin calls me. Ted owned Homes Illustrated magazines, and he owned them all over the country. He had partnership in some back east, and then he owned the Western magazines. And his manager, Norma, who was loved by everybody, had just dropped dead of a heart attack at 48. Maybe that should have told me something, but but the question I asked him,
Isn't hindsight wonderful? Yes.
the question I asked him was, is this Monday through Friday and I get Saturday and Sunday off? And he goes, oh yeah, yeah. He says, as a matter of fact, you pretty much set your own hours because you're going to be the manager. Now, how he found out about me, Steve, was that I was sending out a newsletter every month to my sphere of influence. And he and I had children at Greenfield School together.
Okay.
And so he got my newsletter every month. And his wife tells me it was actually her that pointed that out to him and said, this gal is doing a really good job. I think she'd make a good manager. So he offered me the job. That was 2 years after I gotten into real estate, and I kept my license active. I went to CE classes and all of that, but
Mhm.
obviously wasn't actively listing and selling as manager. I spent 8 years with him. It was the only real job I've ever had with a real job.
Sure.
And I progressed from being the Tucson manager to being the assistant publisher. And at that point, I was running his books in San Diego, in Las Vegas, 3 of them in Phoenix, Albuquerque, and Tucson.
What was the harder part of that job? Would it be shagging people to get their ads to make a deadline, or recruiting new people? I mean,
It was both.
okay,
I was blessed to have a good staff with the getting their stuff for deadline, but deadline was unforgivable. I mean, we did this every other week, and I used to say that you could have chaos, but either the chaos was going to run you or you ran the chaos.
sure.
And so it was the acceptance. And of course, we knew those people that never got them in on time and started early with them. And by then, there were fax machines. In the very beginning, there weren't. And Ted thought they were a waste of time. And people had to actually bring us the ads, or we'd go pick up the ads.
Sure.
And I mean, we did 200-page book with 3 of us. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like there was a lot of staff to go run around. But selling new ads was a big deal. And one of the things I instituted was selling the book within the book. So sort of like Tucson Lifestyle does these days,
Mhm.
is you'd sell 20 pages to one company or on one topic, and then you do overruns of what ran in the book and
Sure.
for them. So he actually was an amazing boss. He was completely hands off. As entrepreneurial as I was, I just kept coming up with new things, and I'd say, can I do this? And he'd go, sure. And then after a while, I didn't even have to ask him if I could do it.
Well, he knew better. He had the woman that dropped dead of the heart attack, you know. His wife probably said, "You're not gonna do that."
But, it was so much fun. Staying till 8 o'clock at night or going in on Saturday was just something that also happened. Um, he also encouraged me to be part of the board. So when you said I was the affiliate of the year,
Right.
it was really nice because I got to have both experiences, both being an active realtor as a member and being an affiliate. And I was on 11 committees and subcommittees the year I was affiliate of the year. It was back when we had a committee for everything, and then those
Sure.
committees had subcommittees, and we all met once a week or once a month for an hour. I ran the marketing sessions up at the Foothills Mall, which we had every Friday morning, and literally would go to the store the night before, get there in the morning and chop up the fruit for and
Sure.
put everything out. So I had to
Yeah.
go shopping. I had to, put it all out there. Glenda Grow had a husband who's since died, Lee Grow, who were on the committee with me, and they were wonderful. But we had just so much fun doing the marketing committee, and I did that I think for 2 years. And then there was a man named Wayne Lindquist, who was a home inspector. He's since moved to California, but he had Tucson home inspections, I think it was, and taught classes. He went and got approved and all of that. Well, he wanted me to teach classes with his license. And so we taught classes together, which was really fun because I could teach classes about how to get the phone to ring, and he could do it after you got the phone to ring and somebody's bought it. Here's what you need to know. And we just had a blast. So I became a licensed Arizona instructor.
Mhm.
After Wayne left, I went ahead and became a school owner. Back
Right.
then,
I saw that.
yeah, back then it was your fingerprints and $15. And you had to have some experience and that sort of thing, but it was easy.
Now, did you have other instructors working for you in that school?
I have over the years. I even brought in a national speaker, Louise Thaxton, who has programs all over the country with a lender for VA. And we actually held an event down at the graveyard, the planes down there in their hangar with 300 people. So that was the biggest event my school did. But mostly I did it because I wanted to be able to give free classes to Women's Council and just have the ability to not have to pay somebody to be doing the class. So if I was instructing my own classes, like if I did something for TAR or Women's Council, I didn't charge anything.
So I see that you were actually certified to do this in New Mexico, Florida, Colorado, Nevada, Tennessee, Texas, and Montana.
Yeah,
S-
what
Were you out traveling?
well, what happened was as I did more teaching and instructing, I got more and more involved. So I became a GRI instructor.
Yeah.
And so from that designation, I also took on a couple other designations. I did the SRS and then the ePro when they were actually teaching it instead of it being online. And so as my designations and stuff grew, I was also I spoke at 6 NAR conventions.
Yeah.
And so I
That's
put in my application for that, and quite and what happens from there is people from the other states see you speak. So I get hired to do a GRI class. The last one I did was in Montana. I think I did it 3 times in Montana. But they take care of all of the paperwork and stuff for me to be an instructor for their state.
I
But
think that's how you and I met actually, was
uh-huh,
through a GRI class,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
when I was first getting into the business.
And that was when I was the hat lady.
Hmm.
So for about 10 years, this was my branding and my trademark, and I'd wear my hats everywhere I went, which was really fun because people would recognize me. And what was kind of fun is when I quit doing it so often, people go, "Where's your hat?" And I went, I did a good job. They recognized me even without my hat.
Oh, sure.
But yes, I did a lot of traveling. My husband was just so wonderful. He'd either take care of the kids or after they grew up, just never complain. I was on the road a lot. I went to every single national meeting and every AAR meeting from 88 to 2011.
Wow.
And made friends. I think one of the things I loved doing was at Women's Council. In '96, the president appointed me technology chair. And I didn't even have an email address. So my first email address was joann@aol.com. And I had to kind of get up to speed really quickly on technology.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was such a blessing because out of having, and this, when you teach something, you have to learn it. So I just went in really deep in learning everything I could and keeping up with it and that type of thing. So I ended up writing with Sue Carton the GRI technology classes, one early in 2000 and then the last one that I think we did back in 2012 or something.
Okay.
But realized I love technology. I hadn't thought of myself as a geek, but it was something that just was fascinating to me.
So now we're at that point now, since you pulled away, so to speak, you can actually kiss and tell and let us know what your favorite course was at this point.
I also was doing the designation for Women's Council, which originally was LTG, and then they put the LTG to bed, and which was Leadership Trained Graduate, and came out with PMN, which I don't think is such a nice designation. It brings up thoughts for people.
Yeah.
But it's performance management
Right.
designation.
Yeah.
They had some time management and
Mm.
personal management courses that I really liked. And when I had said earlier, I pretty much took the job at Homes Illustrated because I was burned out after 2 years. I really have had a quest to help people in this industry live lives they love.
Well,
And
and aren't you a certified Franklin Hovey teacher as well?
I actually, I coach the
Covey.
Franklin
Yeah.
Covey team. When I first became a coach, they were having coaches,
Okay.
and I coached their coaches.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about that, but you also were an author and did publishing, and you wrote a few books, I believe, and you were also publishing one of the, was it the WCR?
Yep. I forget which year it was, but one of the things WCR had available was a monthly magazine back then. It's now digital, but it came out every month, and it was called The Communique. And so I think it was the year after I was technology chair, I was the chair of the Communique, which meant I had to gather all the articles and do it. It was quite a bit of work, but I went, wow, this is fun. So I talked to people that I knew, had an expertise, and say, would you write me an article on this or do that? And so I had a whole year of doing that. I haven't written a book, but I've written chapters in books.
Okay. All right.
So there were 3 books that I wrote chapters in. One was called Chocolate for a Woman's Soul, which was a chapter about my mom, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a chapter in a technology book that a bunch of us that were doing the ePro put together. I'm forgetting what the third one was. It was a long time ago.
That's
But,
okay.
you
Yeah.
know, the publishing I did, I learned so much from Homes Illustrated about printing and publishing. So Ted Turpin, in having the books all over, had his place that his print shop in Tucson, and it's still there, I think, on 7th Street. And so I was very good friends with the person that ran that, and he would show me things. I'd go back with an ad and say, can we do this? And he'd say, no, we can't do that, Joanne. Well, how could we do it? And then he'd go, well, and so I learned so much about publishing, the hard part of it.
Sure.
That it served me well because I knew the parameters of what could and couldn't be done. And of course, that's all changed anyway. So
Well, you made the comment that it's gone all digital at this point, but I don't think it's any less work.
yeah. Well, that's probably true too. It's just different work.
Yeah.
And that was really why I left Homes Illustrated. So in 1992, I had gone to Ted Turpin and said, we need to be doing more than just printing the magazine, because this thing called the internet is coming, and people are going to, and he didn't believe in it at all. So
Oh,
yeah,
tragic
not
mistake.
at
Yeah.
all. So he was just like, no, we've been successful for the last 20 years. We're not going to break our model. And I became increasingly frustrated and was having more and more fun teaching classes and doing that. So I went back and put my real estate license with First Realty Executives, and then Coldwell Banker under Judy Lowe, and Laura Mans, and started selling.
Up above our store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And so I got back into active real estate, but as I was doing that, I was drawn, as we kind of jumped ahead and talked about the speaking and designations and all of that. So one of the things I adored about being a realtor was the flexibility. So I didn't have to just be a realtor or not.
right.
I could do my speaking and all of that. In 1995, on the cover of Time magazine, there was a man named Thomas Leonard. And Thomas, they call the father of coaching. And he actually developed a curriculum that was a 2-year curriculum to train coaches to coach.
Mm.
And out of that came something that was called ICF, which was the International Coaches Federation, which was much like NAR. So there were coaching companies, but they all had to be vetted by ICF in order to actually be a designated coach. Anybody can call themselves a coach.
Sure.
But the story was in Time magazine, and it was about what coaches do. And my son called me up and told me about it and said, "This sounds like what you do, Mom." And I read the magazine. I signed up for the curriculum. I became an instructor there as well.
Wow.
So, and what he was doing back there in 95, they were doing conference, like Zoom calls, except we couldn't see each other.
Sure.
But the whole curriculum was on the telephone with people from all over the country, and we usually had 20 or less. And so when I taught classes, I got, again, learning some technology I didn't know much about. And I started with my own company teaching classes nationwide with something called the real estate game. And we had people call in every day for a month, and they had points. And it was a lot of fun too, but it was pre-Zoom. These days you'd be able to see everybody.
Can you, if you weren't pulling away at this point in time with Zoom and what it would do with your coaching and with instructing both?
Yeah.
Zoom's just, you see what I'm doing with it here, but God bless it. I mean, yesterday I had a meeting that was nationwide through NAR, and so we had 25 people on from Texas, from Florida, from Minneapolis, everywhere around that were part of this meeting for a very specific item, which was great because we could put it out that way. And it was, very successful and easy, quite frankly. Yeah. So, well, we're at that point in the interview where we're coming down the home stretch. One of the things you mentioned, you had written a course in conjunction with Sue Carton. You brought up Judy Lowe and Laura Mance. And I wondered if in leadership roles, if you had any people that you looked up to or who you admired along the way, maybe even through Women's Council of Realtors?
I think there have been so many. Women's Council of Realtors, and especially nationally, gave me some role models that just were fantastic. One of the people, though, that I really have admired is Vicki Cox-Golder. Have you done her interview yet?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about Vicki is she's so approachable, so down to earth. And when you do her life story, she had a life story early on that certainly rivals mine or more, what she had to overcome.
Yeah.
And then having their business, we live up here in Catalina right now, and the well I have has Cox-Golder's name on it.
Oh, there you go. Sure. Yeah.
But she was so generous. She was Women's Council president here in Tucson, and of course president of the board, and then became NAR president. And all along the way, her commitment to the legislative part of it stood out for me, and how seriously she took her leadership in wanting to make a difference in every role, and how hard she worked in it.
Yeah.
So I'd say she definitely is one of those people. The other ones I've mentioned certainly were giving. One person that you probably should interview is Margaret Glover.
Actually, we're going to. Yes.
And I'll have to say something about when I went to national meetings, most of that wasn't funded. So except for the years that I was holding a position and I was funded by Women's Council or by the board, I was paying my own way. And Judy Grammond, I will never forget this. She was president of both, again, Women's
Mhm.
Council and
Sure.
PAR. Every time she went to a national meeting, she invited 3 other people to room with her and paid for it out of her being
Nice.
funded.
Nice.
So Margaret was one of those that I've slept with.
Well,
But
and Judy is doing the connection with Margaret because where there were a
good,
few
yeah,
people because Margaret is turning 100.
I know,
And we thought, well, the Tucson Association of Realtors is also turning 100
right.
this year. And several people said, are you going to interview Margaret? And I said, I'd certainly like to.
Yeah.
And so Judy's making that arrangement. Judy's having a little surgery. She's going to get a new hip. Look out, world. And after that
Really?
happens, then we'll get to sit down with Margaret and have that
Yeah,
interview.
yeah,
Well,
Margaret's wonderful.
so we're, like I said, we're coming to the end here, and I just wondered, did you have any other thoughts on anything that you wanted to add in at this point? I mean, we're covering a very wide expanse of a lifetime in real estate.
Oh, the only other thing is the Hearth Foundation. It's something I'm really proud of. And in what was it, 96, I believe it was, um, there, the CRS nationally put out a challenge to its chapters to do something that would help the community. And Rich Johnson was president of the CRS chapter in Tucson that year. And he got together a bunch of us. Rusty, it's Russell Long, isn't
Yes.
it? It's like I still call my son Richard Ricky.
Yeah.
Rusty was there. And again, he chose people that he knew. I think that was the year I was Women's Council president. So he chose me, Kathy Ryan, or Kate Ryan.
Sure.
And so I think there were 12 of us all together, but the Hearth Foundation was founded. We raised money and put together a foundation to serve homeless women with children. And in the very beginning, I think we could serve 11 families at a time. We bought the still there house down on Prince Road.
Mhm.
And then they since built apartments behind it so people could transition out because it was 60 days. But I thought, how fitting for the Board of Realtors to be serving the
Mhm.
homeless community.
Yeah.
And that's really one of my um, real sources of pride through the years.
And Russell brought it up during his interview too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So the way we like to conclude our interviews is I do 7 quick questions, and I'm hoping for 7 quick answers.
Okay.
So
I don't do
what
things quick, Steve, but I'll try. I'll try.
what's your favorite word?
Love.
Ah, and what's your least favorite word?
I guess I could go the opposite to hate, but I think can't might be a better one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And what turns you on?
My husband.
Well, how about spiritually, creatively, or emotionally?
um, Learning.
Okay. Yeah. And what turns you off?
Negative people and just negativity in general.
Okay. And now this is going to be a wide scoop for you on this question. What profession other than real estate, leather making, feather bands would you have liked to have attempted?
Well, I wanted to be a politician.
Oh,
And my husband told me that was even worse than realtors.
you're not the only one. One of our past presidents had the same answer too. And is there a profession that you're super glad you didn't attempt?
The politician, but I also had thought real strong about going back to school as a lawyer.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'm super glad.
Yeah. So, in closing, if you could do a shout out to anyone living or not in the real estate community, who would it be and why?
Um, three people come to mind. I know that's not
That's all right.
okay. So it goes back to the question you asked me about my mentors. And Vicky Cox Golder is right up there with people I'd give a shout out to. But there's two other national NAR presidents that were women that I
Mhm.
got to know really well through NAR. One was Kathy Watley.
Okay.
She's a realtor from Florida. And like Vicky, just you see, she's this little sweet lady. And
Oh,
yet,
she's a powerhouse.
yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
going to say. That,
I've met
that
her.
you know, when you see her,
Yeah.
you don't see an ego, you don't see
Mhm.
anything but the strength that she has. And she was definitely a model. I ran twice to be national president of Women's Council, and
Okay.
neither time uh, did I get slated. And the first time I ran from the floor, the second time I said to myself, if I'm not slated, I don't have in me what it takes to do
Sure.
that. But Kathy was so supportive. And, what she told me just always went back to her wanting to make a difference in our community and in the world, and doing that through housing. So she was definitely one. And then, real short, Elizabeth Mendenhall
Sure.
just blows me away. As young as she is, and as
Mhm.
smart as she is, and as much difference as she's made. So those are the shout outs.
Oh, that's great. Well, kiddo, we're at the end of the interview, but I like to give you the last word.
Well, the last word is thank you.
Well,
Because I, for you to take on this project, back to my being class secretary and having to get in touch with all of the people from 52 years ago and
mhm.
keep up with what people are doing. I think it's such a gift, Steve, what you're doing. And I have been just blessed through the last, 20 years of knowing you, that that your giving back is much similar to what I just talked about with those ladies. I know how much you care about the people around you, and to do this project, I think is just wonderful. And I was so humbled and appreciative that you asked me to come play with you.
Well, and
You
as
know,
go
there,
ahead. Go ahead.
I had one more thing to say,
Sure.
and it was as I was thinking about things that were important, the staff
Mhm.
at TAR has always been like family. And I've been to a lot of other associations and a lot of other situations. And I think that what we have in this city, with the love, Annalisa, the years I was teaching, with an angel, and nobody even knows her for the most part unless they're involved in the board. But
Sure.
for you to let kind of some of that family feelings from all of us be public is a really cool thing. So thank you.
Well, and we're so blessed at the association because the leadership model that we have, it's sad, but you're right. When you see other institutions and how they're running it, you realize just how spoiled we are. We've
Yeah,
really got some top-notch people and really know how to run good meetings. So
yeah.
again, I thank you for your time and trouble today. I'm so glad we could do this.
Thank you.
All righty.